Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here, and I'm here with episode 19 of my Halloween horror movie reviews. And today's episode is going to be by a sequel to a movie I reviewed last week on last Sunday in the zombie genre, a sequel to a British zombie movie, and just judging by the theme song that was in the intro, yeah, I think you can all know what it is. It's 28 weeks later. Yeah, since I talked about 20 Days Later last week, now I gotta talk about the sequel 28 weeks later. So, this movie was released around 5 or 4 years after the original movie, and when it was released around May 2007, it was it was also like the first. It was also well received by critics and most fans actually. Despite being a horror sequel, it was actually kind of liked by quite a few people. I mean, was it as good as the first one? No, not really. It didn't receive as much acclaim as the first one did, but it's still regarded as a pretty enjoyable, good, and pretty good for a horror sequel nonetheless. Yeah, plus as easily one of the best opening scenes in any horror movie ever. So, so yeah. But anyway, that's happened. What is this movie about? 6 challenging months after the horrific events of 28 Days Later, when the unstoppable rage virus decimated the entire city of London, the U.S. Army has restored order and is repopulating the quarantined city. However, after the first wave of returning refugees, an unsuspecting carrier of the highly transmissible pathogen enters the dead city and unknowingly reignites the spread of the deadly infection. Indeed, the virus is not yet dead, and this time it is more dangerous than ever. Will the nightmare begin again? So, yeah. Unlike the first movie, which was directed by Danny Boyle, this movie is directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. And while may not be Danny Boyle, as far as reinventors of a subgenre, the plague civilization horror movie, but considering this was only his second feature at the time, so it's actually pretty damn impressive. He carved out a sequel that doesn't skip on heavy moral and even political implications on the subject matter, has a hell of a time getting his massive crowds and main characters running for their lives. 28 weeks later, it still has in some similar ways to its predecessor, even if, as mentioned, Boyle and his crew still have the upper hand at being a master at craft a perpetually doomed atmosphere through production design, music, editing, and cinematography, and provides them chilling scenarios to be played out in claustrophobic environments, wide open spaces, and decaying streets. As the title suggests, we see that now London has been cleared of the infected, who've starved off, and now repopulation will soon begin. Soon, because there is still a process to bring people back into the fold. Whereas the first movie had the infected in the background, this film brings them to the forefront. This movie opens with Don, played by a new protagonist, Don, played by Robert Carlise, hiding in a farmhouse with his wife and other when they are attacked by the infected. He manages to escape, but a fit of terror turns up his wife and flees as she is dragged out of sight, which is easily, by far, one of the best opening scenes ever, and one of the best opening scenes in a horror movie. And easily, because it also has one of the best and most intense scores. Scores which was In a House in a Heartbeat, which you saw in the intro. And then we fast forward to the actual movie begins with 28 weeks later, and Britain has pretty much been depopulated. It's believed that the virus has run its course. However, things are not as simple as that because then they encounter a carrier, somebody who has been infected, but is asymptomatic, though not entirely. So, yeah, there are some. However, despite still being liked by quite a few fans of the original, some people still criticize aspects of this film, like why Don was able to get into the room with his wife, yet he managed to escape from the isolation room. My main continuing criticism is that in 20 Days Later, the infected shuns sunlight, whereas in this film they are unaffected by it. But I think it kind of makes the opening scene much more epic and much more terrifying when that they run in the daylight. If there was one thing I would suggest that Drake down is that, as for the incident with Don, my position would be that humans are prone to make mistakes, and simply by not revoking his authority or not even considering that his emotion would override his common sense. I mean, any of us would probably do the same thing if we were in Don's situation. when he ditched his wife for dead in that house in the opening scene. For write his content, make his actions very believable. As for him escaping, it is not clear. Maybe he was led out by an unsuspecting guard who was then attacked and killed. This film actually is almost shot entirely with handheld cameras, kind of like the original movie was. A stylistic choice that adds to the gritty realism Naldo is seeking. This emerges most clearly in the aforementioned prologue. It's not really that different from what Boyle achieved in 20 Days Later, with the notable exception of the sequel being much more fast-paced, taking full advantage of the fact that the infected, unlike your average zombie, are quite skilled runners. That paired with the murky cinematography, most of the movie taking place in dark, closed spaces, instills a relentless sense of dread. Meaning 28 weeks later manages to do what few other sequels have done before. It's every bit as scary as the original movie. And now for the cast in this movie, while I kind of wish Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, whoever would kind of come back for this movie, I'm kind of glad that they didn't really focus on them. I think the story kind of wrapped with 20 Days Later. Their story didn't really need a continuation at that rate, so that's why. So I kind of like they decided to focus on some different characters for a change. Like Fresno Nadillo has made choices as smart as those of his predecessor. Cardille, a familiar face in Boyle's body work, may not be as good looking as Cillian Murphy, but what he lacks in physical appearance, he makes up for in dramatic talent, giving a heartfelt portrayal that is miles away from for his famous roles. Like Bigby, he was the same guy who played Bigby in Trainspotting, which was another Danny Boyle film. And Byrne, who also appeared in another Danny Boyle film, Sunshine, that came out around the same year as this. After a few less fortunate career choices, minor roles average stuff like Troy or Attack of the Clones, does a competent job, as is Jeremy Renner, with additional arenas coming from US TV veterans Idris Elba and Errol Perinua. And Idris Elba would actually go on to play in way more major roles following this movie, especially with films like The Suicide Squad, soon Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and quite a few other stuff. Oh yeah, and Shere Khan the Jungle Book too. Overall, in a genre that is usually doomed by crappy follow-ups, 20 Weeks Later stands as one of the better expectations of that role. It's artful, it's moving, and most of all, it never lets go of the fear factor. So, in kind of a way, if you love the first movie, I'd recommend the sequel. It's actually a pretty good sequel. It's actually worth a watch. And is it as good as the first one? No, of course not, but it's still a very good sequel, and it's actually one of the few better horror sequels out there. I think it's one of the more underrated one of the most underappreciated sequels out there. And man, we should have got a third one. Ugh, we should have got 28 months later. Dang it! Can't believe we never got that third movie. Well, if I ever do a list of films that do need a sequel, 28 Weeks Later would probably be on it. But until then, that'll be it for my review of 28 Weeks Later, and here's how I'm going to rank it.
I am going to give 28 Weeks Later a 9 out of 10.
Alright, there we go. That's it for my review of 28 Weeks Later. So what's going to be the next episode? Well, our next episode is going to be for none other, and I'll give you this tagline. Who you gonna call? Yes, the next episode is the Ghostbusters, the very, very first one. One of the best films out, definitely one of the best comedy films of the 80s, and it definitely still holds up today despite some really shitty follow-ups that would ruin it, like Ghostbusters 2 and Ghostbusters Answer the Call. The first one still holds up as an iconic classic of the 80s, so... And plus, kind of Ghostbusters Afterlife is still coming out. It's kind of coming out this November, so... So yeah, first Ghostbusters movie is going to be the next episode. However, it won't likely be... Well... I might not do it till Saturday, guys. Because, Thursday I'll probably just post kind of a clipper, if I can, but clip from a certain film if I can, because Friday I'm going to be reviewing Dune, because I'm actually going to be going to the Thursday night showing of it tomorrow night. yeah, so I can see it a bit earlier, and I can just since like this year season's almost coming to an end, and I want to have time to review as many more horror films as I can for the very final week of this season, because next week is the last week before Halloween. So yeah. But until then, that'll be it for this episode. Thank you all for watching. And if you'd like to want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.